Is Botswana emerging as one of Africa's most advanced countries? The globe is undergoing a profound change as Douma Boko, the recently elected president of Botswana, joins AES leaders in redefining governance from an African perspective, taking an unprecedented stance against capitalism and socialism. Boko has a radical revolutionary vision for African nations to govern themselves in accordance with their ideals, which is reflected in their rejection of Western capitalism and socialism, devoid of beliefs that have traditionally benefited foreign interests. Boko advocates a paradigm centered on community well-being, autonomy, and adaptability in his demand for an African democracy, which has the potential to reshape governance throughout the continent. What adjustments, though, can he make? Let's investigate. In what ways did capitalism fail Africa? And why does Boko think it isn't compatible with the future of Africa? The main focus of Douma Boko's criticism of capitalism is the continent's history of exploitation, especially in resource-rich countries like Botswana. He represents Africa's fresh hope, approaches and agrees in a humble manner, feeling a little nervous. He contends that despite capitalism's promise of economic expansion, foreign profits have continuously taken precedence over the well-being of African populations. Botswana's precious mineral resources have mostly benefited Western firms under capitalism, with little benefit to the local populace. According to Boko, the impact of capitalism on Africa is a contemporary continuation of colonialism, in which foreign interests profit from wealth extraction, while African countries receive few advantages. On paper, Botswana's economy has been driven by its diamonds and other natural resources, but this has not resulted in broad affluence. Boko notes that local populations receive little reinvestment while foreign businesses benefit. In resource-rich regions, infrastructure, roads, healthcare, and education are frequently underfunded, and the profits are often sent outside. Botswana President Douma Boko stated that he had previously been informed about a system where medical assistance was provided, with the government covering 80% of the costs, while individuals covered the remaining 20%. He questioned why the government was responsible for such a significant portion of the expenses, asking what the reasoning behind this arrangement was. He inquired whether it was because the beneficiaries were employed, or if they were the only ones requiring medical attention due to some unique circumstances. Boko claims that this economic disparity undermines the fundamental goal of resource ownership by sustaining inequality and impeding national development. He claims that capitalism has made Africa a continent of consumers rather than proprietors, reliant on outside economies for capital, goods, and jobs. Boko criticizes capitalism for its propensity to widen social divides in addition to its inclination to extract riches. By giving preference to those who are already wealthy, capitalism perpetuates a cycle in which power and wealth are concentrated, leaving regular people struggling to make ends meet. This implies that a few number of elites or foreign investors benefit greatly from Botswana's economic advances, while the remainder of the population only enjoys a little portion of them. According to Boko, this system does not meet the needs of the typical African by design. He wonders how a society that feeds on exploitation and injustice can serve as a model for African success. Beyond economic disparities, Boko sees capitalism as a paradigm that stifles long-term stability and the welfare of the community. Boko believes that the system favors short-term benefits over long-term progress, which is especially detrimental to Africa's future. Profit-driven multinational firms frequently put short-term gains ahead of social responsibility and environmental protection. In Botswana, this translates into communities being left to pay the price of unsustainable activities, resource depletion, and environmental deterioration. According to Boko, capitalism has left a legacy of social and environmental harm in Africa rather than advancement. But may socialism provide Botswana and other African countries a more equitable and practical option if capitalism is inappropriate? Add your voice to the total liberation of Africa by leaving a comment in the comments section below. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more informative videos like this one. Let's continue. Theoretically, socialism offers equality, justice, and collective ownership values that are highly valued in many African societies. But Boko's criticism of socialism is based on its inflexible top-down design, which he claims is inappropriate for the particular requirements and cultural context of Africa. He notes that adaptive community-based governance, which emphasizes cooperation and shared decision-making at the local level, has long been a staple of African society. On the other hand, socialism's strong reliance on centralized authority can stifle personal initiative and inhibit what many African communities depend on: dynamic, locally driven problem-solving. The tendency of socialism to impose state control over resources and industries, frequently resulting in an overburdened bureaucratic system, is one of Boko's primary grievances with the system. He contends that the one-size-fits-all philosophy of socialism is incompatible with Africa's variety and will eventually result in inefficiency and stagnation. People in Botswana and other African countries are used to decentralized government systems that give local leaders more authority. The concentration of socialism can seem constrictive. According to Boko, socialism has the potential to undermine the fundamental characteristics of African nations by turning African governance into a single, monolithic organization that ignores the unique characteristics of various groups. Furthermore, there have been several difficulties with socialism in Africa. Efforts to introduce socialist paradigms in African countries have frequently resulted in financial difficulties, a reduction in personal liberty, and an increase in governmental corruption. According to Boko, these experiences show that socialism and capitalism are both imported ideologies from very different African settings. He contends that introducing socialism would ultimately cause more harm than benefit because it disregards Africa's core values of family, community, and adaptability. Boko also criticizes socialism for its propensity to inhibit creativity. Socialism's emphasis on state ownership and control can impede technical progression in a society where innovation and adaptability are crucial. For instance, Botswana requires policies that support the growth of regional companies, promote innovation, and generate employment in order to satisfy the demands of a world economy that is changing quickly. Because socialism is bureaucratic, may impede these goals by restricting the independence of entrepreneurs and deterring competition. According to Boko, Africa would be resilient, self-sufficient, and able to utilize the abilities and inventiveness of its people. A goal he feels socialism is unable to achieve. Boko's criticism of socialism is a reflection of his conviction that Africa does not have to adopt foreign ideologies that are ineffective for its citizens. He supports a flexible framework that may change to meet the evolving demands and difficulties of the continent. According to him, socialism is just another import from the West that forces inflexible ideologies on African countries, impeding the creation of a governing framework that accurately captures the continent's ideals and concerns. Boko promotes African democracy as a substitute for capitalism and socialism because they both fall short of Africa's demands. However, what does this actually mean? Douma Boko's idea of African democracy is a groundbreaking approach to administration that aims to completely reject Western ideologies. African democracy places more emphasis on the values, customs, and cultures that are specific to African societies than it does on copying models from other countries. Democracy shouldn't just be a duplicate of Western systems, according to Boko. It needs to be a flexible, changing framework that values African communities' welfare and honors their cultural legacy. The goal of this vision is to establish a system that accurately represents Africa's identity, not to promote isolationism. According to Boko, African democracy is founded on three fundamental ideas: adaptability, collaborative decision-making, and community well-being. African democracy has a strong emphasis on empowering local communities, in contrast to capitalism, which places a higher priority on profit, or socialism, which concentrates power. In Boko's ideal system of government, residents actively participate in decision-making and policies are developed with the needs of the populace in mind, not the other way around. According to this paradigm, democracy is a dynamic system that changes to meet the demands and goals of African communities. The emphasis on the well-being of the group is a fundamental component of African democracy. Instead of concentrating only on economic indicators such as GDP, social justice and quality of life are given top priority in this concept. A successful government, according to Boko, guarantees that all citizens have access to basic resources, clean water, healthcare, education, and security. In an African democracy, the people it governs hold the government responsible, not businesses or foreign investors. The deeply rooted ideals of reciprocal assistance and collective accountability present in all African cultures are reflected in this community-focused strategy. The flexibility of African democracy is another characteristic that sets it apart. Boko supports a system that can adapt and react to changing conditions because he understands that Africa's problems are ever-changing. African democracy empowers leaders to make policies based on what works for their people, in contrast to strict ideological frameworks. According to Boko, African governance should be flexible enough to alter its direction as needed, and history provides advice rather than strict blueprints. This strategy enables African countries to develop solutions that are specifically tailored to their needs and to maintain their resilience in the face of global changes. Boko is not alone as his vision comes to life. His resolve to reshape government for Africa is shared by the AES Alliance of African Leaders, which is bound together by a shared vision of economic sovereignty and self-determination. Why is the AES Alliance so important to Africa's future, and what part does it play in promoting African sovereignty? Africa is making a significant step toward economic and political self-determination with the AES Alliance, which brings together leaders from nations including Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and now Botswana. Douma Boko's recent choice to work with these leaders demonstrates his dedication to creating Africa free from the long-standing influence of Western ideology and economic reliance. Sovereignty means more to the AES Alliance than just political independence. It is a complex movement that includes cultural pride, economic independence, and policymaking that accurately represents the needs and ideals of Africans. Boko's affiliation with AES signifies a unified front against Western capitalism and socialism, which have historically dominated the continent's growth and governing systems. In contrast to foreign-imposed economic systems, the AES coalition supports a distinctive African model that is based on African identity and capable of promoting genuine prosperity for the continent. Regarding Boko and his AES supporters, while socialism's inflexible framework may not align with Africa's cultural variety, capitalism symbolizes the ongoing exploitation of African resources. Collectively, they are laying the foundation for a governance model that represents African values and advances the interests of African countries. The AES Alliance's emphasis on economic sovereignty is one of its main features. Boko and other AES members contend that Western capitalism has effectively served as a contemporary kind of colonialism, exploiting Africa's abundant resources for the benefit of foreign powers at the expense of indigenous populations. AES leaders are responding by advocating for laws that guarantee Africa's natural resources stay on the continent and benefit its citizens directly. This entails creating banking systems, resource management plans, and trade regulations free from Western influence. Boko wants to see a system in place in Botswana where the money made from resources like diamonds is used to fund local healthcare, education, and infrastructure rather than being embezzled by multinational firms. The AES partnership also seeks to lessen dependency on Western financial institutions, which have historically subjected African countries to crippling debt and restrictive economic practices. By establishing substitute economic frameworks, AES nations seek to strengthen their ability to withstand the turbulence of international markets and enable African countries to function autonomously. Developing regional trade alliances, establishing African banks with independent lending authority, and investigating collaborations within the BRICS bloc, which has a common goal of opposing Western-dominated financial systems, are all part of this strategy. Boko's involvement with AES is consistent with his views on African democracy, which emphasize policies that put people before profits and nations before corporations. Another important component of the AES Alliance's vision for African governance is its emphasis on cultural autonomy. AES leaders contend that Western cultural norms have frequently been embraced by African nations at the expense of their own identities. This trend has an impact on everything from governance structures to educational curricula. According to Boko and his AES colleagues, a powerful, independent Africa needs to be closely tied to its heritage, embracing its languages, customs, and social norms. This strategy represents Boko's belief that African values and life experiences should serve as the foundation for governance, rather than alien philosophies that seem distant from the people's everyday reality. AES leaders want to encourage Africans to imagine a future that is entirely their own by promoting a revitalized feeling of cultural pride and self-respect. There is some disagreement around the alliance's position, particularly from foreign stakeholders who see the AES movement as a danger to established economic ties and global stability. Western businesses and investors view AES policies as a threat to their interests, since they are used to having advantageous access to Africa's markets and resources. But according to Boko and the AES Alliance, ending exploitative behaviors is essential to Africa's long-term growth. They contend that rather than attempting to seize control of the continent's resources, Western organizations that genuinely value African relationships ought to be prepared to interact on an equal basis. The combined vision of AES offers a powerful example of what African administration can entail if it is liberated from Western control. A bold vision that strikes a deep chord with young Africans who are growing more and more disenchanted with the present quo. By uniting, AES leaders like Boko intend to strengthen Africa's position as a leader in and of itself by promoting a pan-African movement that represents African interests internationally. This partnership demonstrates Boko's commitment to an African democracy that upholds the continent's unique history, empowers its citizens, and reclaims their right to self-determination. Boko's vision for African democracy gains pace and strength with the establishment of a strong partnership. Such a revolutionary idea is not without its difficulties, though. What challenges, then, must Boko and the AES Alliance surmount in order to bring about African democracy? Notwithstanding the audacity of Boko's vision and the unity of the AES Alliance, there are many obstacles in the way of African democracy. The change is being questioned or flatly opposed by existing institutions, foreign investors, and conventional power brokers, both domestically and internationally. These obstacles highlight how hard it is for Boko and his supporters to establish a new form of government in a world where Western political and economic interests continue to dominate. The potential is among the most urgent issues. Opposition from firmly established local elites who have profited from the existing structures. Influential organizations that have ties to the Western businesses may view Boko's African democracy as a challenge to their financial interests and authority in Botswana and other African countries. These elites, who profit from profitable agreements with multinational firms that take use of Africa's resources, have frequently contributed to the preservation of foreign economic power on the continent. It is not easy to persuade these stakeholders to adopt a governance model that puts local communities ahead of corporate profits. Furthermore, foreign investors who are used to making large gains from African resources are probably going to oppose the AES alliance's goals. Oil and agricultural products, Africa's natural wealth, have been flowing out of the continent for decades, boosting Western economies. This relationship is upset by the AES concept of economic sovereignty, and Western investors can see these policies as direct challenges to their commercial interests. Boko is well aware of the financial dangers associated with the potential repercussions of sanctions, divestiture, and decreased foreign aid. He is still adamant, nevertheless, that the long-term objective of African independence outweighs any short-term economic hardship. Beyond outside influences, Boko and the AES alliance must tackle the enormous challenge of changing African public opinion. Africans have been schooled for generations under institutions that frequently portray Western models as the ideal form of government. Many people believe that capitalism and socialism are the only practical solutions, and African approaches are either disregarded or neglected. Therefore, Boko's task is to encourage a cultural change that gives Africans the confidence to believe that they are in charge of their own destiny. In order to shift the narrative and promote pride and a sense of ownership in African democracy, media, and cultural activities will be crucial. The logistical challenges of creating alternative economic systems independent of Western financial institutions must also be addressed by the AES alliance. It is an ambitious endeavor to establish African-owned banks, regional trade agreements, and new alliances within the BRICS group. The change can be challenging to maintain without substantial infrastructure and cooperation. Boko and his supporters are determined to overcome these obstacles, but they understand that doing so would call for endurance, patience, and close cooperation throughout the continent. Lastly, maintaining unity among its members is a challenge for the AES alliance. Although Boko and the leaders of Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali have similar ideas about economic sovereignty, every nation has its own political and economic circumstances. The success of the alliance will depend on AES continuing to be a unified entity that can withstand both internal and external challenges. Boko is committed to fostering trust and cooperation among African countries that have traditionally been split by colonial borders and outside forces, because he recognizes that unity is AES's greatest asset. Boko and the AES coalition are committed to their goal of redefining Africa's course in spite of these significant obstacles. They provide a model for a continent that is committed to rising on its own terms, while still promoting African democracy. In conclusion, Douma Boko's victory as Botswana's president and his coalition with AES leaders represent a turning point for Africa. Boko supports African democracy and opposes both capitalism and socialism. A system of governance based on the ideals, requirements, and ambitions of Africa. Supported by the AES group, his agenda represents a bold challenge to Western ideology's historical domination on the continent. Even while there will likely be opposition from both domestic and foreign parties along the way, more and more Africans who are looking for change are drawn to Boko's dedication to cultural pride and economic sovereignty. If the AES alliance is effective, it has the potential to change the political landscape of Africa by giving countries the freedom to choose their own paths without depending on resources or approval from the West. African democracy under Boko is more than just a political ideology. It is a self-determination movement that reclaims Africa's future and inspires other countries to adopt government structures that honor their cultural heritage. The AES leaders and Boko's continued progress sends a strong message. It's time for Africa to take charge, make its own decisions, and prosper on its own terms. Do you believe Botswana's new leader, President Boko, can effect change? Will he have the backing of other countries? What do you think about the leadership of new African presidents? Tell us what you think in the comments section below. We explore the rich history, culture, and the ongoing struggle for sovereignty in Africa. Join us in this important conversation by subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you're not just staying informed, you're becoming part of a movement dedicated to reclaiming Africa's rightful place on the global stage. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Let's work together to spread knowledge and inspire change. Thanks for watching.